Hey everybody, welcome back to Guns and Gadgets, the premier source for Second Amendment news. And I want to get you up to date with the appropriations bill that's going through Congress right now. It's the second half of the budget. The big beautiful bill that we covered ad nauseum here when it came to the NFA stuff is about 2/3 of the nation's spending, and the appropriations bill is the remaining amount of money. And it's going through Congress right now. It's one of those must-pass bills. And within it is a decimation of ATF. So I want to show you exactly what it says so that you know, rather than having, some snippets or some websites that only give you a little bit of the information, because there's some good stuff in here. There's some weak sauce stuff in here. And I want to hear you and your opinion in the comments to see if you kind of coordinate with me. And we'll discuss this as we go along. But it starts out on page 38 with the ATF budget, and I want to read that to you. Okay, under the ATF salaries and expenses, it says, for necessary expenses of the ATF for training of state and local law enforcement agencies with or without reimbursement, including training in connection with the training and acquisition of canines for explosives and fire accelerants detection, and for provision of laboratory assistance to state and local law enforcement agencies with or without reimbursement, $1,207,350,000, of which not to exceed $3,000 shall be for official reception and representation expenses, not to exceed $1 million shall be available for the payment of attorney's fees as provided by that section, and not to exceed $25 million shall remain available until expended, provided that no funds made available by this or any other act may be used to transfer the functions, missions, or activities of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives to other agencies or departments. So that's their budget, all right? $1.207350 billion. And none of it can be used to transfer their job or their responsibilities to anybody else, which means deputizing local and state law enforcement officers to do their bidding. There's another section in here I want to show you as well pertaining to the budget, and it has to do with NFA stuff. But let's go over their budget, okay? So it's $1.207350 billion for fiscal year 26. This fiscal year 25, it was $1.952 billion. So that's a reduction of $750 million, call it, which is a big cut. 24 was 1.6 billion. 23 it was the same-ish, 1.6 billion. 22 was 1.5. We don't see this level of 1.2 billion-ish until you go back to 2016 of 1.24 billion and 2015 of 1.201 billion. So in essence, this budget reduces ATF funding 10 years. So they go back to 2015, 2016 funding, which is going to affect them. It's going to change a lot of things within ATF budget, and that can only be good. But there's always a but when it comes to this stuff. I want to show you this last section here, and then we'll get to the but. Provided further that not more than 40% of the amounts made available under this heading may be obligated unless processing times for National Firearms Act applications do not exceed 120 days in the case of a paper application and 60 days in the case of e-forms, electronic applications. So that's a huge thing here in the budget. It means you're not going to get more than 40% of your budget, ATF, if you can't maintain the 120-day max of paper applications, 60-day max of e-form applications for National Firearms Act items. Look, I think the NFA is unconstitutional, illegal, should be abolished. We all are in agreement with that. But if you choose to buy a suppressor, even after January 1st, 2026, where the tax is reduced to $0, they have to maintain those standards for approvals or disapprovals. Otherwise, they don't get 60% of their budget, which is huge when it comes to this kind of stuff. Now, like I said, this is just the beginning of the deep cuts to the ATF in this document. I'm going to show you all of it. There's cuts not only budgetarily, but operationally, and it's good news for gun owners, FFLs, and manufacturers. But in my opinion, this is the easy way out. and I want to hear what you think about that claim. This is the easy way out. Stay tuned. I want to see what you think. This video is sponsored by Aura. If you've ever wondered how scammers get your phone number or why your inbox is flooded with spam, this is why. Your personal information is out there, and chances are it's already been stolen and sold off by data brokers. They do it without your consent, and they make billions selling it to marketers, scammers, and even stalkers. Every 14 seconds, someone becomes a victim of identity theft, and that's why Aura is here to protect you and your family from digital threats before they become real-life disasters. Aura monitors your personal information across the dark web and alerts you in real time if something's wrong, and even helps you recover stolen accounts or money with a US-based team that's available 24/7. But Aura doesn't stop there. It also blocks scam calls, it safeguards your devices from malware, and even helps protect your kids online. Plus, Aura includes $5 million in identity theft insurance protection, and that's why I chose Aura. It really is an all-in-one, powerful, easy-to-use app. Protect what matters most. Start your free 14-day trial at aura.com/gunsandgadgets, links down below and in the pinned comment, and see if you have any data that's been exposed. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and you shouldn't either. Thanks to Aura for sponsoring the video. All right, so again, maintains the fast processing times for NFA applications. Okay, that's not fast, and my fast is like, hey, it's approved immediately. Thank you. Second Amendment. But it also regulates funds for transfers to cartel members, which is interesting because, can you say Fast and Furious? Section 215. None of the funds made available under this act, other than the National Instant Criminal Background Check System established under Section 103 of the Brady Handgun Violence Protection Act, may be used by a federal law enforcement officer to facilitate the transfer of an operable firearm to an individual if the federal law enforcement officer knows or suspects that the individual is an agent of a drug cartel, unless law enforcement personnel of the United States continuously monitor or control the firearm at all times. That sounds like Operation Fast and Furious to me. That should be a no-go, but here it is in the budget. Now, there are things in here called rescissions, which are actual big cuts other than defunding. It's like taking away money immediately, and ATF got hit here too. It's actually Section 521, but we're gonna have to go down to line 6 for the ATF, and it says out of their salaries and expenses line, $50 million is taken back no later than September 30th, 2026. They got to give the federal government back our money, our tax money, taken away from ATF out of salary and expenses. That's a big cut on top of the money they're already losing. Remember that 750 million-ish? Well, here's 50 million out of that line item as well. Let's talk about defunding ATF's frame and receiver rule. Section 543. None of the funds made available by this or any other act may be used to implement, administer, apply, enforce, carry out, or defend, that's key, I think, any part of ATF's final rule entitled Definition of Frame or Receiver and Identification of Firearms. Or defend. That's key. And what I expect once this becomes law, once Trump signs it, and there'll be fanfare to show he did, then what it's saying is that there's no money left to defend anything related to the frame or receiver rule lawsuits, and there's some out there. So this could end immediately upon him signing this into law, or once the budget becomes effective. But I'd rather see, in some cases, I'd rather see the lawsuit continue, as long as that might take, to get a true win, a true victory. And that could be easily done by the AG saying, hey, we're no longer defending this because this is unconstitutional and we request the court to rule as such. This violates the Second Amendment. That's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen as far as these, all of these lawsuits. But the first one we're talking about is the frame and receiver rule, defunded, including the defense of it. So the next section is interesting as well, Section 544. None of the funds made available by this or any other act may be used to implement, administer, apply, enforce, or carry out Executive Order 14092, reducing gun violence and making our communities safer. That was Joe Biden's executive order weaponizing the ATF and instituting the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Now, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was codified into law, went through Congress, passed by both chambers, signed by Joe Biden with the help of John Cornyn and the coward GOP, but most of it's become law. So I don't know what specific this is going to defund, but again, easy way out. This could be, they could do a law, they could rescind a law. There's a lot of things they could do, but easy way out here. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. There's more, and it gets better, but this one was the entire executive order for Biden. But let's talk about defunding every single ATF regulation issued or finalized under Joe Biden. That's a good one. Here it is, Section 547. None of the funds made available by this act may be used to implement, administer, apply, enforce, or carry out any regulation issued by the ATF, issued or finalized on or after January 21, 2021. What's so special about that date? Joe Biden's first day in office as President of the United States. So anything that was done under Joe Biden's administration, when it comes to rules, regulations issued or finalized by the ATF, not funded. Again, easy to do, immediate action in the budget, but we need more. We want our pound of flesh. We want to take that bite, and we need something as Americans, as the owners and the purveyors of this country. So let's keep going. Let's talk about defunding the stabilizing brace rule. And this is actually addressed twice in this budget. Here's the first part. Section 548, none of the funds made available by this or any other act may be used to implement, administer, apply, enforce, carry out, or defend any part of ATF's final rule entitled Factoring Criteria for Firearms with Attached Stabilizing Braces. Or defend. We need opinions, rulings by judges with the DOJ via the Attorney General saying, we're no longer defending this. This rule is unconstitutional and illegal. It violates the Second Amendment, and we request the judge rule that it is unconstitutional. That is the only way this stuff gets handled permanently. Otherwise, it can just be refunded by the next president's budget, and it will. 562 says none of the funds made available by this act may be used for gun buybacks or relinquishment programs. All right, that's good. That's the federal side. Doesn't affect the states from doing it, but the feds cannot do federal gun buybacks under the new budget. Okay, that's decent. Well, let's talk about red flags now. Section 563. None of the funds made available by this act may be used to implement any statute, rule, policy, or interpretive guidance, or to disperse any grants or funding that would have the effect of creating, utilizing, supporting, or implementing a law or procedure which could result in the confiscation of any firearm without, in all cases, providing the gun owner with a notice and opportunity to participate in a hearing. That's saying we need due process if you're going to do this, but it doesn't say hearing first. So there's always a way around things. There's another section here on red flags too. 564, none of the funds made available by this act may be used to fund or implement any red flag or extreme risk protection order laws. So 2 sections, no red flags, no funding, no grants, no bribe money to states, but it's been passed into law. So the law, under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, it created those bribery accounts to the grant money to bribe states to do red flag laws. So if it's law, the law is defunded, so that stops immediately. But the next anti-gun or Democrat president could refund that law. So this is the easy way out. We need something more because this could be undone. Section 565 says no funds from this or any other act or provided from any accounts in the Treasury delivered by the collection of fees available to the agencies funded by this act may be available for obligation or expenditure to study, prepare, propose, or adopt any rule, regulation, administrative order, or secretarial or executive action for the purposes of restricting the production, purchase, sale, or transfer of any firearm unless expressly authorized by Congress. So the federal budget cannot go to any program, rule, law, anything that was looking to restrict the production, purchase, sale, or transfer of firearms. And then it was said, unless expressly authorized by Congress. Well, the Second Amendment supersedes Congress. They don't even have the ability to do that. But, what do I know? Now, the next section is a good one, too. It talks about the Federal Firearms Registry, or they're not supposed to have one. 566, none of the funds made available by this or any other act may be used to create, operate, or maintain a Federal Firearms Registry. Well, that's already a law. I don't know why they have to put that in the budget. Why? Because there is one. We'll talk about that in a second because it addresses it. The next section I want to show you is ATF civil suits. And I've reread this one a few times and it doesn't quite make sense to me. So you all let me know what you think about it as interpreted. 567 is the section. It says none of the funds made available by this act may be used to pay the salaries or expenses of personnel to facilitate, advise, promote, or otherwise support any civil actions to which the ATF is not a named party against any licensee or other person purported to be a subject of a regulation or oversight of the ATF. So I guess the salaries, was the wording, salaries or expenses can't be paid unless the ATF is named? Was that, so were they doing that? Were they paying for other people who were sued when it comes to FFLs, licensees losing their licenses? And were we paying for other people that weren't the ATF? Interesting. Staying with odd stuff, the Demand 2 program is being addressed. The Demand 2 program it requires FFLs with 25 or more traces. That's when a gun is used in a crime and they run the serial number and it comes back to being sold at this FFL. That's a trace. They'll say, tell us who the original purchaser, who they are, blah, 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 blah. Within a time frame of 3 years or less in a calendar year, it requires them to submit an annual report and blah, 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 blah. Well, this changes a little bit of the requirements. But let's talk about the second section here that actually defunds the brace rule. This is part 2 of 2, and it's here in section 569. None of the funds made available by this or any other act may be used to 1. Classify, tax, or register any firearm with an attached stabilizing brace or similar brace or rearward attachment, notwithstanding any extended additional contact surface, rearward, or use outside of its original design, or use as a buttstock, or use to enable shoulder fire as a rifle, short-barreled rifle, or short-barreled shotgun under the GCA and NFA, or any other such acts of Congress, or direct any other law enforcement or regulatory entity to conduct any of the activities described in paragraph 1. So they can't use any money to classify pistol-braced firearms as SBRs or SBSs unless they're used outside of their original function, intended function, etc. So it says they can't use any money for an NFA registration of your pistol-braced firearms. That is good. That is very, very good. Let's talk about defunding the engaged in the business rule as well. None of the funds made available by this act or any other act may be used to implement, administer, apply, enforce, carry out, or defend any part of ATF's final rule entitled Definition of Engaged in the Business as a Dealer in Firearms. And that's where if you or I wanted to sell our personally owned legal items to another person who is legally allowed to have them and buy them, the ATF was saying, and under Biden, that you had to go and have an FFL do that transfer, thus killing the person-to-person sales. And not only is that illegal and unconstitutional, it's defunded. But again, easy way out, it's just budgetary, can be undone. So we need a little more. We need a little more defense on that. We need some lawsuits to be won, which is why that or defend is a big part. We need the AG and the DOJ to start doing this immediately, but have judges render a decision saying the rule's unconstitutional, not just dropping the case. All right, let's talk about the zero tolerance policy on FFLs. That's section 592. None of the funds made available by this can be used to implement, administer, enforce ATF Order 5370.1 Echo. And that's the zero tolerance policy where ATF would just use their power under Biden's freaking demand that any FFL who made a mistake could have their license removed, lose their total livelihood over clerical errors. Yes, it happened several times. This defunds that, and there's no or defend here, which, I don't know, was an accident that it was left out, but zero tolerance rule defunded. How about the second time I mentioned there was a second mention of a federal gun registry? Well, let's go to section 609, which says none of the funds appropriated by this act shall be used for the out-of-business records imaging system database maintained by ATF. And that is their digitally scanned searchable registry of all Form 4473s or records of firearms that we all bought at FFLs. I've covered this for years. If FFL went out of business, there were a couple things they could do. They could destroy records. They could transfer items to another FFL. ATF said, nope, you have to keep your 4473s indefinitely now. And if and when you go out of business, we get them all. And they scan them in. And it's a searchable database proven thanks to Gun Owners of America's FOIA Act, where ATF had to admit that they had a billion 4473 registry. A billion items are in there. And we're all on the list. The next section I want to show you defunds states that criminalize or dissuade concealed carry. And this is a section, this is the meat and potatoes of this for as far as it comes to ATF. I'm going to read this section and I want your opinion because it sounds good, but will it do anything? And I hope this isn't what Trump is getting at when he talks about concealed carry. If it gets to my desk, I'll sign it because this isn't a law. I'll explain. Here it is, section 612. None of the funds made available by this act may be dispersed to any state, district, territory, or possession of the U.S. which imposes a criminal or civil penalty on or otherwise indirectly dissuades, including by imposing a financial or other barrier to entry, any ordinary law-abiding citizen who is carrying a valid license or permit which is issued pursuant to the law of a state, district, territory, or possession, and which permits the individual to carry a concealed firearm from carrying a handgun publicly for self-defense according to the same terms authorized by an unrestricted license of or permit issued to a resident of the state and subject only to the same conditions and limitations, except as to eligibility to possess or carry imposed by or under federal or state law or the law of a political subdivision of a state that apply to the possession or carrying of a concealed handgun by residents of the state or political subdivision who are licensed by the state or political subdivision to do so or not prohibited by the state from doing so. It's saying that none of the funds in this act can be sent to a state that, and I'm going to read the words again, that imposes criminal or civil penalty on lawful law-abiding citizens carrying a firearm under a permit, that's the part that sucks, or any financial or dissuades, including in imposing any financial or barrier to entry. That's costs. So if somebody a state charges for a permit, they're not going to get money under this act. If they have laws that make it illegal for us to carry in their state, reciprocity, but it says you would have to abide by the same restrictions of that state's permit. You think California is going to say, oh my God, this is bad, we need this money, let's let people carry here from other states? I think this is put in there because H.R. 38, the concealed carry reciprocity, and I can't think of the number now of Thomas Massey's constitutional carry bill, they're not going to get 60 votes in the Senate, which means they're effectively dead. They're not going anywhere. So is this the way Trump is going to follow through on his promise? I don't know. What do you think? This is an interesting section. And I've reached out to a couple gun attorneys and people in the gun world for their official and legal opinions on this. I'll let you know if anything changes, but and I want you to remember that this can be changed under the next president's budget, and it will. Perfect world, they need to stop defending the lawsuits against ATF and the NFA so that pro-constitutional rulings can be rendered. And most of the sections I read said, can you have any of this money to defend these rules ATF passed? So this could be good as far as ending all of these lawsuits, but it's only good if we get a pro-constitutional, pro-2A ruling that is entered by the judge. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I know this is a long video, but this is a lot of information that you need to know. And I also want you to remember that in the famous words of Thomas Paine, the duty of a true patriot is to protect his country from its government. Have a good day. Take care.